Let's have a round of applause for our panel on a love story, essential strategies to attract and keep an audience. It's going to be led by Jacki Vause from Dimoso.
Hello.
Thanks, Jacki.
Right, let me just get my notes up. Okay. Right. Welcome, everybody. Hello, everyone. Nice to see so many smiling, fresh faces after yesterday's libations. We've got everybody. This is great. Okay, good. So I'm Jacki. I'm the CEO of Dimoso, which is the world's best video games PR and marketing consultancy. Go and see my lot if you want to have a chat about marketing. That's my plug. So moving swiftly on, I have a wonderful panel here who can really talk to you about the love affair, which is our games production, and how to attract and how to keep your users coming. So I'm going to let them all introduce themselves. But hold your hands up also during the session if there's something you just want to ask somebody to carry on with their point. And then at the end of the session, we can also ask questions. So I'm going to hand over to you, Imre. You introduce yourself.
Hello, hi, my name is Imre and I'm old and I'm looking around and I can feel like I'm increasingly backwards compatibility in the games industry. But I started in board games, I'm that old, and I've done all sorts of games and all sorts of genres, and I co-founded Bossa Studios, which is most known for comedy games like Surgeon Simulator and other which were claimed to be YouTube bait, which I was very proud of. And now I am starting a new studio, which is still in secret mode.
And we still can't get that out of you, can we? No, it's very annoying. Anybody knows, come and tell me. Robin.
Hello everyone, my name is Robin, and I've been in the influencer marketing industry for my entire professional career, and now in the last 6 years I've been running a company called Wehype, so we focus specifically on gaming influencer marketing.
Excellent. Alexandra.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexandra. I've been in the industry for 3 years now, part of Imperia Online. We've been in the market since almost 18 years now. We were created in 2005, and during this time we have a very big portfolio of almost 30 games. And across these 30 games, we have about 65 million players. We were acquired by Stillfront in 2018. And I hope you guys find this panel very useful, as always interesting.
Excellent. And Jeppe?
Hey everyone, I just want to say thanks for prioritizing this over lunch. I hope we can live up to that. My name is Jeppe. I've been in the games industry for a little over 14 years by now, mostly working in mobile. Started out before smartphones and was the original producer on Subway Surfers, so that's probably my biggest claim to fame. Then I've been at a number of different developers and publishers over the years, and now I work as head of publishing at Funday Factory, mid-sized game studio doing premium games across platforms. Very excited to be here today.
Excellent. It's a wonderful panel. Who here is a games developer interested in attracting more players and users? Nobody wants to own up to themselves. Hi Sam, I see you at the back there. Excellent. So when we sort of met up pre this event, we had a good old discussion about, I mean, there are so many ways of attracting users and players to your game or your experience. So we kind of came down to the thought of, let's just look at the game. And I think one of the things that we all agreed on was that it all comes down to identity, which is where I'm going to bring you in, Imre. How important do you think it is thinking about attracting people right at the start? Because you're right at the start of your new venture now. How important do you think it is thinking about these strategies right from the start, and how do you go about doing that?
The reality is that, and it's such a cliche thing to say, that we are bombarded with entertainment from TikTok to Instagram to film, TV, video games, everything. And increasingly, when you optimize against everyone, you're going to get no one. And you can see this, that it's harder. User acquisition is not as it used to be. And there's a reason for that. And what stands out is when people feel that they can relate to something. And my personal story was that when I was involved in a success, I noticed that it's because those games or forms of entertainment made a statement. They were different enough. They were shocking, maybe. And so with Bossa, we leaned into that, and we were doing ridiculous games because no one else was, right? And so with my new studio, it is the reason it is secret is because we want to get it right. So actually, we already had, I think we're through now 10, 12 companies, which were fake companies with fake games, with fake focus tests and all that, just to test the waters of different audiences so our brand name is not tainted yet, but we can test those kind of outrageous statements, what we're doing, to build the image, and that influences the games we make. So from the long list of games we wanted to create, we're gonna pick the one which fits that where we feel a momentum in the community. So for me, it's fundamental. You need to make a big statement, otherwise you're going to get lost in the noise.
But not everybody has a game that is a big statement maker, do they? I mean, a lot of people have different types of games that are appealing to many different types of people. How do you think you sort of cement that identity right from the start?
I think that, and again, there are different ways to approach it, from the most cynical to the most, wholesome, and from the most creative to the more commercial, of whatever you want to do. I can only tell you my story and our story, which is that if you do not plan and do not design against an audience, I believe you don't know what you're doing. And I just had a rage about it not long ago on Twitter when I heard someone describe their audience as millennial man. And I was like, what the hell is that? Like, like 1 millennial could be with a stretch the parent of another. It's just an insane thing to say. And to me, when someone says something like that, that means you have no idea what you're doing. And I, as a creator, like to create for an audience. And so whatever you do, let's say you don't go for shock. I know that with Surgeon Simulator, the fact that you are elbow deep in someone's chest cavity, like that was for the shock value, and that created that attention. If you don't want to do that, that's fine, but just build that relationship with the audience very early on. So I start focus testing games before we even start prototyping.
Right.
So on pitch level, and I already have, and my view is that I don't want 1 million fans. My goal at the beginning is to find 1 super fan, and then 2, and then 4, and go up like that. Not companies going and I have to have like 1,000. I was like, no, that's not. You don't. If you have 1,000, you don't have super fans. You have people who tolerate you. And I think that's true for every game. Find that person, find that one individual, and then your momentum of your game is that can you increase the number of super fans with a steady rate, because that's going to translate into people who actually going to spend money on or inside your game.
Jeppe, I think you want to.
Yeah, I just want to agree and say it's also part of our process, right? Is to try and focus group test as early as possible, show very early concepts, very rough outlining of the game that you're trying to build, and maybe have the audience actually try and tell that game back to you, right? To see how it's resonating, what kind of emotions is it generating, right? We're talking about a love story here, right? And I think that's also what you're saying, Imre, right? Is like reducing it just to these stereotypical personalities in a way is not really benefiting you in the way that you design the game, right? So I think it's actually bringing in that audience from the get-go, right? And you're also talking about it on a company level, right? Is what I'm hearing at least.
Oh yeah, so I think it's the game and then the team and then your whole company and your whole company identity. I think it grows from that. I am a big believer in this, because without that audience, you're nothing, right? I can be really creative, and it doesn't matter until someone plays the game. It's not going to be a success. I can make a great game. It's not going to be successful until people actually play it. And so I never believed in like self-serving creativity. And you do that with your audience, and frankly, you get to become a better game designer, a better marketer, a better everything if you listen. And frankly, your job is easier and cheaper if you have the audience on your side. So, and the fact that I also take it that my company identity will be defined by that, that's just one more step of an extension on that same idea. That I want an identity that people can look at and think, okay, yeah, that resonates with me. What they stand for, I believe in. But again, ultimately it comes back down, is it a good game and is there a person who wants to play it?
Yeah, and that audience thing, I mean, I think, from an audience perspective, we say, know your audience, but a lot of us have been involved with games that are very broad-based. And, how is it best to know your audience? I'm going to pop that straight to you, Jeppe.
I think there are multiple ways to look at that, really, right? It's for me, it comes a lot down to, are you able to explain your game, and does it have I call it the shortest possible story in a way. Like it's kind of like a setup in a way, something that resonates emotionally with the player, right? I think that's where it really starts, that you're able to explain your game very simply, like Surgeon Simulator, like it's in the name, it's in the identity of the game, right? We look at it a little bit, I mean, it's a complex question, right? But it's like we look at it very broadly in the way that we work with audiences from the get-go, and I think it also comes down to like what kind of players do you have within your company as well, right? Like what we've tried to do, just as an example, is try and map what kind of games do we prefer within. We're a 45-man studio, right? So not everyone is maybe wired to work on a specific game that we're doing, right? So it's also trying to understand what drives me as a game developer and as a player. So I think that's part of it at least.
And Alexandra, we've talked about your audience. Your audience is a very specific kind of audience, isn't it, at Imperia Online?
So at Imperia, for us, it's really also important to understand our audience for all of our titles. Currently, we have 3 main titles, and we started actually as a browser company. So Imperia Online existed back in 2005, MMO RTS strategy game. So our 2 co-founders, when they met, when they crossed paths, they were both really big fans of Age of Empires, so they wanted to create a game similar to that. And since the first launch of the game, so it was August 23rd, the community really grew day by day. And at a certain point, I think we didn't have a player from any, we had a player from every country that existed. So one thing that we really focus on when we talk about community is receiving feedback from them, and actively engaging with them. Our community managers are really close with our users for Imperia Online specifically, because it's a really long game that has existed for a really long time, so they know our users by name. We do live streams for our games as well, and we often invite users to participate. We have really big tournaments such as World Cup, Winter Olympics, etc. And when we invite those players, they really want to participate and feel part of the community, part of the whole process of the game. So we invite them, we chat with them really often. We try to make them feel acknowledged, if that makes sense. So they themselves also, I think it relates to what you both said, so they themselves also build the community within our own game. When we do these tournaments, these really big tournaments, for example, World Cup, which is hosted every year in Imperia Online, players act really often, from different countries, they do come together and play. It's a tournament that lasts for about 1 to 2 months, and they come together, they actively play, they celebrate when they win. We had this case where one time Brazil became world champions, and they called our community managers on Zoom to just show them how they were celebrating. They hired a pool villa, and they were in the pool just with champagne. It was really interesting. So I think forming this community around the players, that the game is operating for them, and that you want to give them a better player experience, is something that's really important for us.
Yeah,
and
it's really interesting.
Yeah.
That you are really building that community, and something that we sort of discussed was the fact that these things like building your own identity, having a sense of your own mission, your purpose, communicating that amongst your community, these aren't huge budgets that you need to to spend, it's that thinking time and that working out what your connection is and how best to communicate that. And it seems to all come down to authenticity and being really authentic to your game, not... and this has all changed as we've seen technology improve for us, and we've got so many different... Obviously, we just heard about the fact it's so much more difficult to track your audiences, but we have a lot of power in our hands via our communities. And Robin, I wanted to just move over to you because you're in influencer marketing, so a lot of people associate that with budgets of spending money on influencers to attract users and to retain users now. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that, but also, what about working with people right at the genesis of their projects?
Yeah, sure. So I think what was mentioned prior about like finding early like super users and ambassadors for your game, you can kind of apply the same strategy when working with content creators and with influencers. So really trying to, in the early days, identify who are content creators on the different platforms that really would enjoy this type of game. And you can look for who's playing similar games, if there are any. Maybe there's a whole new genre and you would have to do some more work. But trying to identify that early on and start with maybe one or two and build a great relationship with those. I think that's a good way to start. And on the community management side, I think it's also a good way to scale community management. You can use creators as kind of an extended arm, so they can speak to their communities, and you only have one person to kind of work with from the game company side.
You said that you can actually bring in influencers to test games right at the start.
Yes, exactly.
Done a lot of that?
Yeah, so we have seen a couple of our clients to kind of bring in creators, content creators early on to really understand kind of the content creation angle of a game. So will this be interesting to create content for, as it will only become more and more important for your games to be relevant on social media from a user generating content perspective. So you can bring them on as early as like prototype phase or like early alpha phase to test out, okay, will this be fun to create YouTube content for or to live stream and so on. And we have seen like small changes that can make a big difference. So are there any moments in the game that can be fun to create around and so on?
Yeah, I actually just wanted to ask you as well, like it sounds like even more you're breaking down the barrier between product and marketing in many ways, right? Like you're saying like it doesn't need to be there, that gap, right? Like it's one uniform working with your audience across, right, wherever they engage with it. But I also wanted to ask you, Robert, in terms of like, this comes down to telling stories as well, right? Like I think that's where the influencers, like they are trying to, you know, entertain and work with their community, right? Like so, in my experience, it helps having a game that again allows them to have these moments, right? It's one thing that they enjoy that particular genre, but it's also giving them, you know, like a game that can work in that setting, right?
Yes, 100%. I mean, when you look at this, kind of influencers add a commentary layer to your game, so it should be something that's fun to maybe talk around, to create content around, and blending, as you say, the product and the marketing can also make it much more cost efficiently, because then you can, over time, try to work more organically with creators, to have them create because they think it's actually fun and enjoy it rather than only being paid for it, because it's a very competitive market, and most of the content that is being produced by influencers is organic, it's not paid. So most of their time they spend time creating content for the game they really enjoy and think is fun and that their community enjoys. So if you can find that angle, obviously that would be the best. It's hard at many times, but I mean, we see a lot of, especially in the mobile space now, really thinking about these things. How can we early on in the product and in the game development phase bring in these perspectives so that we can be more efficient building our communities in the long term?
Excellent. We're talking very positively about, you know, hey, great, we've got all these users, this great community, and if you've got a good, strong identity, where can it go wrong? Who wants to step up to that one? What are the pitfalls with this? I'm going to pick on you, Jeppe.
What?
Where can it go wrong? Like, you mean in terms of like...
Of working with your community, you spend all this time thinking about community. What are the things that you could do wrong that you've got to avoid?
I think it's maybe just underestimating the power of it, right? Like, I think in my past experience as well is like you can make a lot of assumptions of what your community wants from the game, right? And it's actually filtering that a little bit and understanding that, right? I think that's maybe, underestimating like the power of the community. Like it can be a whole organic thing itself, right?
Yeah.
I think that's definitely one pitfall, is just like it's spiraling out, doing stuff where you're not in sync with the community, right? I think, that would be my take on it.
I think Alexandra knows.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I think what she's saying is completely correct. I think that you definitely need to be very transparent with your community and be open with them. So being able to communicate with them, like throughout social media or Discord, like whatever channels that you have, like since day one, is really important. And the most important thing is actually like actively listening to them. So if they say like you release something, and if they say like this, we don't like it, it doesn't work, like please remove it, like try to be open with them and transparent, and maybe listen to their like what they're saying, because at the end this is your community and this is your audience, like you're doing the game for them. And if they leave because of that, it just doesn't make sense. I think it's not worth it, because the panel is trying to keep and retain the players, so definitely this is something to look for.
One mistake that I've seen many times actually is that if you work with creators that you think very subjectively about who you're supposed to work with, in the terms of I want to work with this big influencer, for example, which is not authentic to your game and what is actually relevant for you. So one thing to kind of avoid that is to do your homework first and foremost, to really identify who is really aligned with your game and with your values as a company and so on as well. And then supporting smaller creators, I think, is a good way of like really showing your community that you're not only going for like the big guys or whatever, but rather trying to really go grassroots level. I think that's not doing that is a mistake.
I think already was mentioned authenticity, and I'm going to offer you a very destructive way on that. My grandfather used to say that the problem with lying is lying is one thing, the real problem comes in when you have bad memory. And you don't remember what you lied. And I think that the thing with authenticity is that it's just, I'm lazy. Just being authentic is just easier because you don't have to remember what you lied. If you identify, if there's a game you want to build, as you said, and if there is an audience, and there is a shared love, there is a connection. That's how human relationships work, right? You meet someone at a party and you start chatting and you realize, oh, we both love that game, or we both fan of a sports team or whatever. Then you have a connection and you can build on that, and it's an authentic thing. If you make that up, that you love that sport team, you will be very quickly found out. And so that is that if you have that authentic relationship between you and your product and with your audience, that's naturally going to happen, right? That's going to be inevitably, it's going to be so much easier to maintain that. And then the other part of it is that there's a duality, that players, without players you don't know what you're building, but players have no clue. And I think the reality is that when you listen to players, you have to listen to players, but you have to understand why they are saying something, not what they are saying. It's so often it happens in focus tests. I see that someone comes back with a feedback, and you look at it and it's like, well, you're wrong, but why are you wrong? And one of my favorite examples was an action game I worked on where we got back feedback that a specific weapon was too weak. And the desire and what my producer told me is to make that weapon stronger. What I've done, because I am that kind of a person, is that I said, yes, I'm going to make the weapon stronger, and I did not. I made some changes, the game went back to the same focus test group. The feedback came glowing. It's amazing, so much strong ways. Wow, it's really good. Literally, the only thing I changed is increase the volume of the sound effect on the gun.
Wow.
There was no other changes. And that was enough to make people feel like it was more powerful. Now, I'm not saying that to subvert everything players are saying, but just understand why they're saying it. Do that extra question. It's like not just only, oh, make it bigger. It's like, why? And really understand that. If you do that, then you can. Otherwise, it's very easy to get lost, and the negativity and the damage comes that you listen to everyone and you end up losing that personality. Because if your game is big enough and you have enough people, then suddenly it's going to be, again, you lose that personality because you're going to try to please everyone, and that cannot be done.
That's so true. You can't be dragged in a million different ways. And it's like somebody goes to a doctor and they say they've got a pain in their foot. It could actually be their knee that's causing the problem and not anything to do with the foot. So it's a bit, it is a fine line, isn't it? It's listening to, but it's all about communication, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's how you communicate with your community. And what Alexandra said just then, which is listening, but also responding. You don't actually have to serve up and deliver everything a community wants, but showing that you're taking them on board. What methods do you, I'm going to pick on you, Imre. What methods are you thinking, without giving away what your games are going to be, what methods are you thinking of, how are you going to think about communicating with your players? What are you going to use? Now that we've got all these different difficulties in terms of targeting audiences with UA and everything else, how do you think you can sort of leverage or put into first practice infrastructures to start working with a community as you build it and communicating to them?
The good news is that when, like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it would have been much harder to do that, right? And right now, just go where they are, right? There are, communities already exist, and if they are on Discord, you go to Discord. If it's a more open platform, some sort of social media, go there, and just try to release your prejudices. Like I am not a huge fan of social media in general, but you have to go where the players are and you just talk to them there. I find that there are platforms which are more focused are going to be better because people are on that forum specifically for that subject. So if you go to a subreddit, it's good, but also they're going to be distracted by other stuff. On your Discord server, they are there on that Discord for that specific reason. And they're going to have plenty of other servers, right? Like I know people who are on like 100 servers. I don't know how the hell, I can barely manage like a dozen channels. And so, but that's great because you have, again, the super fans. And I think that's what you have to separate. How do you talk to your super fans is very different of how you talk to everyone else and your influencers and everyone else. I think with the super fans, frankly, you can do it in email if you like, or chat messages on WhatsApp or whatever, because especially in the beginning, it's not going to be that many. No. So you can maintain that, and then very soon afterwards, you have to build a proper community management. And the good thing about that is, from that point, is their problem, not mine. So they can figure out how to do it. They're the experts. But when you're small, honestly, you can do it with anything. It just. And I'm a person who really loves systems, and I constantly have to remind myself not to do that. If the way for text message, do it that way. It doesn't matter. Like just whatever works, whatever they are already, roll with that. And then when you have that momentum, when you have a group of, when you cannot manage them, your super fans in that, that's when you escalate into other platforms and specific stuff later on. In the beginning, whatever way you can communicate with them.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that. I mean, the methods change over time during the production of the game, right? Obviously, right? But what we try and do is actually try and capture this audience, like over time. So we build up like whatever it is, mailing lists or just contact information, our Discord, and try and like gauge what are these players, like what are they interested in, right? And when we're developing a new game, we try and separate that into, okay, who should we try and test this game on, right? Whether it's a very early prototype or just a concept, just a picture of the game and a title maybe, or different titles, have them try and tell it back to us, like I think it's actually that, capturing like those data points, capturing those players over time, right? I think it's really important, especially if you're a studio. I mean, we work cross-platform on multiple titles, right? So you never know like what type of players like are gonna come in handy for a specific project, right?
Exactly. And what about cross promotion? You know, are you doing within your setup? Are you, when you bring out new titles, are you cross promoting?
Yeah, I mean, I can lead on this one. In my opinion, like, cross-promotion is a little bit seen like the holy grail. I think it's because it's like, it's the ideal scenario. Okay, I have one big audience in this game, I can just easily move it into another game. This comes really down to how you build your studio, right? Like, if you're building games in all kinds of different genres, the reality is like you can't just move a player into another game, and actually creating like a cohesive, what can you say, message across all your games is really hard. You know, like, I think that's why Imre is building it from the ground up, right? Within the studio, like within the authenticity of the studio. So, in my opinion, it can be done, but you have to really consider like your roadmap of games going in. Yeah.
It really depends how similar your games are. So there are studios like Paradox or Introversion. I might as well pay them a subscription fee because I am going to buy everything they ever do. So and I know, because what they do is my kind of game, and I am their player and they are my developer, and I know blindly I can trust them, right? And so but there are other studios, including Bossa games, who do very different types of games, and there is no necessarily a translation from one to the other. Some people might have an attachment to us because of Surgeon Simulator that might not necessarily work on something which is a completely different genre we are doing. So I think that even on more casual, easier, mobile, quicker consumption, whatever, even then I can see somewhere a game was recommended to me by the same publisher, and I was like, that's not even close to why. And I get it why, they have my email and whatever, I get it, but that for me is a quick way for you to end up on my spam list, because it's like, why are you I'm clearly not the audience for that. So I would warn that do it, but do it very, very mindfully.
What about investing in tools that help you track and monitor your what sort of tools are you using, or would you recommend, if any, to monitor and track what users are doing, other than Discord, or, you know, in terms of nothing?
I think what you said with like doing it as long as you can, very manually, even like more personal, like WhatsApp or whatever it might be, as long as you simply can. I think that's, a very good way to go. Wherever there is like less friction in the start, and then you would need to see how you can kind of scale that up. And I assume that most studios leverage Discord now for that.
Yeah, I've seen that. Alexandra.
Yeah, for us as well, in terms of tracking, obviously, we do use like platforms such as AppsFlyer, but in terms of if you want to know like what your community is actively engaging on and discussing, I would also suggest using Discord as well. So back like in the 2005 when we started the title, it was mainly forums, so we didn't have Discord back then. Social media wasn't that active. So Imperia was, the whole community was in forums, but then we moved slowly when, the mobile industry boomed. We slowly moved to social media and Discord. So for all three of our main titles, currently we use Discord. And one thing that we've seen is that, firstly, being custom and what all of these guys said, so customization to the players is really important, and showing them that you know them. So for example, for one of our games, Crush Them All, on Discord we have like the moderator there, which is one of our community managers. We have separated different like sub-channels where players, for example, new players can discuss this, players which have played for more than a long time than average players. It depends how much points you have in the game. So we have open discussion channels, we have questions channels, we have announcement channels, and all these, they're probably more than 20. So all these players can go and discuss whatever they're interested in, find new interests, and then you can actually see, I think it's easier to see from the community management side, from the studio, to see what the players are discussing, what they want, what they're, just in the game, or what their interest is. And with that, we also, besides that, we also do newsletters for our players, for our browser titles. We send out newsletters to them, for example, custom ones if they like, because we have players who engage in specific tournaments, so not each one of them, because they don't find it, for example, they found more interesting besides the other. So we try to also go custom with them with these newsletters, because the player base at our browser titles are a bit older than our mobile games. So, as I mentioned, it's different. So you should go custom for them. It works just communication via email, and for our mobile titles, Discord works really well.
You got anything to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to take a step back again, and here is actually a pitfall in my opinion. Like, there is a misconception that just because your audience is all interested in the one game that you have, that they're also all of them going to be interested in, the next game that you're building. And I think a lot of us as game developers, we know this ourselves. Like, for example, okay, I play a lot of strategy games, for sure, but I'm also a huge player of very colorful, simple, match-free games. And I don't think a lot of people would have profiled me like that. And I think that's also what Imre is saying. Like, okay, if you profile me, I'm Jeppe, I'm 37 years old, I love strategy games. You can't just show me any strategy game, right? And I think that's just coming down to like actually understanding what kind of games, like they might have shown up for that, for Surgeon Simulator or for whatever game, right? But they maybe have a variety of different other types of games, right? And it's actually understanding what other types of games are they also playing in order to be able to show them meaningful games in the future, right? So that's why cross-promotion is very, very difficult, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's people's player personalities, like maybe there is a genre, but I think we need to get away from just looking at genre. Of course, you can do market or audience testing early, or market assessments in order to understand like the size of a certain genre, but there is like underlying emotions that actually drive interest into games.
We're coming right back to emotion.
The thing is that if you listen to your super fans, and again, beginning you have 1, and then 2, and then at some point 100, right? If you are recruiting in that angle, and at some point, if it doesn't work, you change direction. But when you know your direction, and that's what the type of person you bring in, the opinion of 1,000 people is not going to be that different of the opinion of 12. That there will be a lot of echoing. And so what happens when you get to bigger one, of course, there are sentiment analysis, there are various ways that if you manually cannot keep up, and there are various AI tools which are coming to match virtual influencers. You're going to have virtual community management, is that they are following up and they understand, you can see how the trends are changing and all that. So I think it's not that different. The principle is the same, is that you listen to those people whose opinion matters a lot, for whom you are creating this game. And that's not going to change, right? It's just a bigger community, you need different tools, but fundamentally it's the same. Matrix collection inside the game is the same idea as me talking to the first super fan. It's just a different tool set to do it.
Yeah. And it's interesting as well to see all the different, we talked about Discord and being able to, create different channels on Discord and work with them and listen to people there. But also we've got different groups of, and I know you hate the term millennial man, but we've got different groups of people coming through who are used to communicating on different platforms as well. New, younger gamers who just, who literally sort of have the attention span of a gnat when it comes to short form communication. It has to be now and it has to be immediate, and I want to be served up everything I expect right now in terms of being managed by the sort of community I'm within. So you sort of mentioned that you don't like social media, Imre, but social media does play quite a strong force in some of your games, doesn't it, in terms of the people playing?
Yeah, we use, so besides Discord, what we spoken about, we use social media to also as an alternative channel to communicate with our players. So I think Imperia Online has over 500,000 so followers on Facebook. Then we have the other two games, which we have Facebook and Instagram channels for. We try to be active on social media because players engage in it. They post comments and etc. They obviously express their needs with some either changes or new things they want to see. One thing we also strive to do, and we implemented this December, was for our game Siege World War II. So it's one of our mobile titles. We talked with our game designers, and we wanted to create an event calendar for our community for them to enter. And for example, we put some instructions how they could enter, and the idea was that we, during this countdown that we were doing for Christmas, we wanted to make them feel, reward them in some way. So we were each day we were doing this countdown where we were revealing some information about what we will be giving them and etc. And we actually saw a lot of more engagement than what we usually see. So it worked out really well for us. At the end, we picked like 15 users. We asked them if they could give their ID through messages, and they were really happy. And even on Discord later and on the same social media, they were asking if it's going to be more of this. So this is one thing that we try to, we did that, and we will also do in the future to retain the players that we have. Because they really like the communication with us. And I think it's important to, what we mentioned earlier, to respond, make them feel that you understand them.
And that you could also take over to working with influencers as well. So, you could have that kind of that joint promotion.
Yeah, I think so. With influencers, it's what Robin said. It's you can build brand awareness and you can reach new audiences. But I think it's really what worked for us, and what's important is to target influencers which understand your games and your community. We've had some, so back in 2019, Imperia Online Mobile, we have a mobile version of our game, was celebrating a 10-year anniversary. And what we did actually was we reached out to top YouTube gaming influencers in Bulgaria. So biggest YouTube gaming channels. We reached out to them and we said, hey, we want would you be interested in promoting this game? Does it fit your portfolio? Most of the gaming influencers do more RPG strategy games from my perspective. And it was a good fit for us because Imperia Online strategy. So we reached out to them and we said, would you be interested in doing videos for this game? And most of them that we reached, they said yes. So we had this pile of influencers which we did some planning, organizing, and our idea was for influencers to create brand awareness for our game. Specifically in Bulgaria, to create this hype. So when we planned, we wanted for the influencers to release their videos on that specific date for when we were celebrating the 10-year anniversary. We also, besides that, did some talking and applying for a featuring for Apple and Google on the same specific date.
Right, so it all came together.
All came together, and it was a success. So creating this brand awareness and actively engaging the audience of the influencers, YouTubers, for our game was a success. And I think this all came down to the idea of them being open, wanting to, explain this game and be actively engaged in it. Because they were really interested in the game, we created like a separate server for them, and we gave them the opportunity to engage with the players. So it was a custom server only for them, only for the players. Yeah.
But I think we're going to have to, sorry, Alexandra, I
Fine.
think I'm getting little flaps down here from
Everyone's
David.
missing lunch now.
Yeah, everybody wants their lunch.
Yeah, that was brilliant, but thank you very much. If we're going to take a question from the audience, we should do it now before we reach the top of the hour. So let's grab that one question from over there.
Hi there, hello, I'm an LBS student. My name is Yuri. I have a question. You've touched upon it a few times about scaling from superfans to the general audience. And I'm still apprehensive about this idea where you show it to your superfans, 10, 12 people. I think they might want something very different than the general audience. Can you maybe talk about the times where it didn't work and why you think it didn't work, or do you think it works all the time where you just, try to build the game around hardcore fans and then everyone else likes it once you scale? Thanks.
I'm going to oversimplify this. It's either you go for a huge audience and then you're going to count your DAUs and MAUs and your return rates and all that, and there is established metrics for that. You don't have to Google much, and you can present it to your investors, and if they're high, you're going to be successful. Just perfect, right? If you go with the superfan idea, what you measure is the momentum of the growth of the number of superfans. And there are games where it's true, they build it and they will come. If you follow the superfan route, it's different. Continue building it because they came and stayed, right? And so that's the momentum. In that one, that's what you measure, that if you can see. And those are highly targeted games. A game like Ringbirds is not for everyone, right? And it's a huge game with millions of sales, right? And it's a completely different category to Funday. And they can be perfectly successful games and huge games on their own rights. And not every methodology is going to be true for every single game. If you're making a mass market, match-free game, then it's very unlikely the superfan model is going to work. Although I am a super fan of match-free games like you are, but nonetheless it might not work the same way because it's harder to reach an audience, etc.
Great, thank you.
Right.
I think we'll leave it there. But
Okay.
that was a fantastic panel.
Thank
one
you.
One of those topics that we could obviously do for loads longer. But we are at the end of time, so if you have any questions for our panellists, some great insight, grab them on Meet to Match or find them afterwards, or find them out in the hall as we head out for lunch. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
Round of applause for
Dave.
Jacki.